Okay, so on the first part, I understand that this is actually kind of a ridiculous thought that I'm having right now. Honestly, it's probably not something that's going to happen at all, and it'd be kind of ludicrous to even imagine that this even occurs to begin with. But let's just kind of break this down right now. So apparently, with Fast and the Furious or Fate of the Furious actually coming out this last weekend and basically shattering, just absolutely shattering so many records, especially in the international box office opening weekend record. We have so many people right now basically talking about all these different potentials for anything about the Fast and Furious franchise, albeit, even more films, be it beyond the 10 and 9 that are actually announced right now, and even various spin-offs that I've been hearing about, even some weird crossovers that people have been talking about. You have anything between like Jason Statham and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson basically having a spin-off of the potentially the mid-credit scene that was cut because of the feud between Vin Diesel and The Rock. And then you also have other people saying that maybe they should just start spinning off characters regardless and kind of turn this into more of a, I guess, cinematic universe of just driving cars and being crazy ridiculous. And then I've also heard even more crazy thoughts about, people wanting Fast and the Furious to basically do crossovers with things like Jurassic Park or even John Wick. And I have to say, like, as much fun as these films are, I do think that those are all really, really cool ideas. In fact, I would probably even see a lot of them. But what exactly would probably be the coolest idea in order to basically take the Fast and Furious franchise and basically hop on, at least for Universal, to hop on the success of these films, is imagining that it's one of the biggest franchises of all time at this point, and kind of jumpstart something that they've been working on, or at least kind of crossing their fingers and hoping that this is actually something that could happen for them in the near future. Well, that is why or how could they possibly take Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character, Hobbs, from the Fast and Furious franchise and basically implement him into the monster universe or Universal Monster Universe that they've been building for the last couple years now, and is going to finally start debuting with The Mummy. Now, I know that sounds really, really crazy. I know it sounds really, really crazy, but hear me out, because I think that this is actually a really awesome idea. So, for the most part, we don't necessarily know a whole lot about this universe going into, I guess, The Mummy or anything like this. I mean, they've been saying that they're building this in a way that they're kind of standalone films that are going to be fun and scary in their own right, and kind of implementing really small things in between each film to kind of build up to some, I guess, grand Avengers-like cinematic showdown or something like that. I'm not necessarily sure. And I know a lot of people aren't necessarily okay or even just excited about that, but personally, it's one of the things that I really want to see. I'm not a huge fan of, the old-timey Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, the Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm not a huge fan of those films. I mean, I've seen them, but I've definitely I've never really been too fond of them, although it was basically like one of the original cinematic universes, so we need to pay some respect to it in order to kind of see exactly how we got to this point in our cinematic history in terms of, the Avengers and the whole concept of cinematic universes basically taking over the entire concept of storytelling, at least in not even just cinemas but also television at this point, with DC's kind of extended universe on the CW, and then also the multiple spin-offs that we have taking place in the same universes. Good examples are Fear the Walking Dead and Better Call Saul, kind of spinning off from The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad respectively. And then at the same point you also have basically the fan theories to say those things interconnect and everything. It's just I'm getting out of place. But personally, I really think that what they could do, because there's been some kind of talk, at least eventually, for the last couple of years now, to actually have to spin Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character off into, I guess, his own franchise. Take Hobbs and make him his own person, his own kind of individual film franchise, and give him kind of at least extend the Fast and Furious brand outside of the main anthology that they've been telling for the last, or the better part of 2 decades now. And I feel like the best way that they could do that is considering the fact that they are at the same time building this other cinematic universe to kind of take place in and everything else, and how they've already kind of given ideas that not only are they making The Mummy, but they also are going to kind of scrap the Dracula Untold part of it and kind of redo Dracula, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, and all these other things that they have kind of in the works right now. But they also said they're going to do a Van Helsing film. My idea is to just basically retcon it and make, for whatever reason, once you kind of allow Hobbs to basically get away from the Fast and Furious crew. I know they've already said that he's coming back for Fast and Furious 9, but maybe he doesn't come back for 10. Maybe even if he does, kind of having the Fast and Furious brand be the launching pad, or at least part of this particular universe, even just like remotely, tangibly. Like, it doesn't really make sense, but when have these films ever really made sense? Basically have him go off, do his own thing, considering the way The Mummy looks, with Tom Cruise basically going and being a world hopper, considering that Hobbs is in fact also a world hopper in his own right, but also kind of a military man, kind of a government entity, having to go one place or another, and then finding out, or at least achieving the mantle some way of Van Helsing, and then is kind of, I guess, wrapped up in this entire ridiculous world that they've been setting up in The Mummy and in any other film that they're going to be releasing, if this ends up being a success. And personally, I feel like this is actually a really good idea, considering the fact that you have a multitude of movies at this point, considering the Hobbs' character was introduced in the 5th film. If he's for the 9th film or the 10th film, you have 4 or 5 films of this particular character to jump off on. The Rock is probably one of the most charismatic, amazing actors that we have, like huge star, just like a genuine movie star, to kind of be the center focus and probably the most human aspect of this cinematic monster universe, and probably even be the glue that holds it together. I know they've been saying that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Russell Crowe from The Mummy, is actually going to be the person who's kind of being the glue between each film. I feel like that's the rumor that I've been hearing. But in terms of kind of shifting gears on that, if it works, fine. But if it doesn't work, shifting gears and having The Rock basically play a Van Helsing-like character who is the in-between kind of person, kind of dictating what's going on in this entire cinematic universe between Dracula and Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein and the Invisible Man and the Wolfman and all these other people that they're going to be basically adapting cinematically, and then also giving him his own franchise, and maybe even potentially kind of siphoning off a little bit more of the goodwill from the Fast and Furious franchise going into the future of this cinematic franchise, and intermixing and mingling the two is something that I think would be pretty awesome in my opinion. And I know this is not something that could be done perfectly, but at the same time, I mean, the Fast and Furious franchise it's evolved in a way that I feel like something like this wouldn't be too ridiculous for fans. I mean, I understand it's somewhat of a culture shock, more so than the first film in the Fast and Furious franchise that was released so long ago, basically being, just kind of a point blank remake with, instead of surfing, but with cars, and then basically becoming The Rock punching submarine missiles into other trucks and everything like that. And I mean, it's kind of its own natural progression that kind of made sense over the course, like I said, of 2 decades. And maybe doing something like this in the course of maybe, I guess, a couple of years would be something that just really wouldn't work out. But considering we have so many elements and so much ridiculous storytelling in between, both, I guess, just the last couple of Fast and Furious films and what we've seen from The Mummy, they don't seem to be, I guess, too far off of each other. It doesn't seem to be like they couldn't exist in the same world, at least to me. And it's not as ridiculous as kind of saying that, well, yeah, like the Fast and Furious franchise has been existing in the same world as something like the Jurassic Park franchise, or for whatever reason, it would never happen, considering Lionsgate owns John Wick and everything, actually giving that kind of a crossover a go. I mean, I feel like both of them are jokes, but still interesting concepts if you ask me. But then you have someone like Hobbs' character, The Rock, basically acting as the person in between who is in this universe but also in the other universe, and they can start intermingling characters and giving people something to do that's also really interesting, that's kind of away from the story being told in the Fast and Furious films, especially if they decide to end it. That can keep the series going and potentially even help this, budding cinematic universe that they've been doing. One of the things that is really interesting about this is that Chris Morgan, the writer of the Fast and Furious franchise, is actually a direct producer of this writing room that they have in order to bring this cinematic universe of movie monsters into being. So there is some kind of connection there, not just being the same studio, but also direct creative control or direct creative personalities being kind of intermingled as well already. So I know this is kind of a weird situation, but honestly, I feel like it's something that would probably be for the best. I mean, honestly, you can share your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. I would really love to hear them because I know it's crazy. I know anything like that, but it's something I would really like to see. But anyway, guys, I'm just going to sign off on that. Please make sure to rate, comment, subscribe, share this out to all your friends if you're interested in hearing more of this stuff or anything. I mean, I have so many ideas, and I do want to cover the cinematic Marvel or monster universe for Universal because I personally feel like it's a cool idea. But anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it at that. Please make sure to rate, comment, subscribe, share this out to all your friends, like I said, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye.